I never planned on working security. Not at an amusement park, and definitely not at night. But bills don't care what you want, and after months of dead-end applications, Hollow Pines was the only place that would call me back. It wasn't much to look at. The place sat in the middle of nowhere, Missouri, half hidden by pine trees that grew thick and uneven, their shadows overlapping like twisted fingers across the cracked parking lot. From a distance, the rides still had color, still looked like they might be fun if you squinted hard enough. But up close, you could see the chipped paint, the rust bleeding along bolts, the weeds creeping through concrete. When I walked in for orientation, the air smelled faintly of burned sugar and mildew, like cotton candy left too long in the rain. That's when I met Mr. Delaney. He was waiting for me in the security office, a squat building near the entrance that looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. He wore a faded polo with the Hollow Pines logo, though it was stretched tight over his belly. His face was sunken, gray in a way that suggested he hadn't slept properly in years. "Name's Delaney," he said, not bothering to shake my hand. He just looked me over, like he was sizing up whether I'd last more than a week. Then, he slid a single sheet of paper across the desk. "Read it, out loud." I frowned but did as told. My voice sounded uncertain in the silence of the office. "The rules of Hollow Pines night security. Lock all gates by midnight, even if people are still inside. If the carousel starts playing music after closing, do not approach it. Never look into the funhouse mirrors after 1 a.m. If a child asks for help in the dark, do not follow them. Keep the clown animatronics powered if they shut off. Restart them immediately. If you hear laughter on the roller coaster tracks, turn away and cover your ears. Always wave back at the Ferris wheel operator, even though no one is up there." By the time I finished reading, I couldn't help it. I laughed. "Come on, man, this a hazing thing? You guys trying to scare the new guy?" Delaney didn't laugh. He didn't smile. His eyes stayed flat, unblinking. "They're not jokes. You follow them, you stay alive, you break them." He trailed off, staring past me, as though remembering something he didn't want to speak aloud. Then, sharper, "Do you understand?" I swallowed my laugh. "Yeah, sure. Good. Shift starts at 10. You finish at 6. You walk the grounds every hour. You keep the sheet with you at all times. Don't lose it." I didn't believe him. Not really. I mean, I grew up on ghost stories, Ouija boards, Bloody Mary, haunted barns out on gravel roads. This sounded no different. A bunch of weird rules to make the place feel scarier than it was. But that first night, while making rounds, I realized something that set my teeth on edge. The Ferris wheel. It hadn't run in years, Delaney told me. The cars were locked, the motor stripped for parts, and yet, sometime past midnight, when I turned my flashlight toward it, I saw the top cabin sway against the windless night, and at the operator's booth, a figure, thin, silhouetted, standing perfectly still. Then, slowly, almost deliberately, it raised its hand in a wave. My body went cold. I don't know why I did it, but I lifted my hand and waved back. The figure nodded once. Then, without a sound, it vanished. That's when I knew the rules weren't a joke, and I was trapped in them. By my second night, the novelty of being a night guard had already worn off. The park felt heavier than it should, as if the air itself pressed down the moment the gates locked behind me. Empty rides towered in silence, their shadows stretching across the cracked pavement like the skeletons of a dead carnival. I tried to tell myself the first night had been my imagination. That figure at the Ferris wheel? A trick of light, maybe a trespasser, though Delaney swore nobody else had been on the grounds. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I hadn't just seen something. I had been seen. Still, I kept telling myself rules were rules. Lock the gates, patrol the grounds, ignore the nonsense. At 12:30, the park was still. I checked the cotton candy stand, then the roller coaster tracks, listening to the wind whistle through the metal. My flashlight beam jittered across the wooden boards, showing rust, flaking paint, and nothing more. By 12:45, I was halfway back to the security office when I heard it. A faint, lilting tune, calliope music, the kind you'd expect from a carousel in the middle of a bright summer day. Kids laughing as wooden horses rose and fell. Except this wasn't summer, and there weren't any kids. The music was distant but clear, weaving through the pines like it had always been there. My heart sank. Rule #2. If the carousel starts playing music after closing, do not approach it. I froze. The carousel sat dead center in the park. I could see it from where I stood, dark, still, nothing unusual. And yet, as the music swelled, soft lights flickered on around it. Bulbs sputtered to life one by one, circling the ride until the whole platform glowed faintly yellow against the night. I gripped the rule sheet tighter in my pocket. My gut screamed at me to look closer, to see what was happening. But the rules were clear. Do not approach. So I didn't. I turned away, forcing my feet to move. But my eyes betrayed me. From the corner of my vision, I saw them. Figures, shapes rising and falling with the motion of the wooden horses, though I knew damn well no electricity was running to that ride. Their outlines shifted as if made of smoke, their smiles stretched wide and frozen. Their hands clutched the poles, knuckles pale, though I never saw them move. One horse in particular stood near the edge of the platform. Its painted face gleamed under the sputtering bulbs, chipped teeth showing in a mockery of a grin. Its glass eye cracked, yellowed, rolled to follow me as I passed. I didn't breathe again until the music cut off like a snapped wire. The lights dimmed to nothing. When I turned back, the carousel was still and dark, as if it had never moved. The rest of the shift passed in silence, but the image burned behind my eyelids. When morning came, Delaney was waiting. "You look like hell," he said simply. "Carousel," I muttered, rubbing my temples. "It was playing last night. I didn't go near, I swear." He nodded, satisfied, but his next words chilled me more than the ride had. "What would have happened if you had?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Delaney's eyes darkened. He glanced past me, toward the direction of the ride, as if even mentioning it too loudly was dangerous. "The horses don't let go," he said quietly. Then he handed me my pay stub and walked away. That night I dreamed of Hollow Pines. I was strapped to one of the carousel horses, leather belt biting into my chest. The horse moved, faster and faster, its wooden teeth gnashing. The music screamed around me, the lights flashing until they burned white. Shadowy riders turned their heads toward me in perfect unison, mouths locked in those endless smiles. No matter how I struggled, I couldn't free myself. The horse's glass eye gleamed with something alive. And in the dream, I knew Delaney hadn't been lying. The horses never let go. The funhouse was my least favorite part of the park. Even before the rules, even before I knew what I was walking into, there was something about that building that felt wrong. It sat off to the side of the midway, tucked between two shuttered food stalls. The paint had peeled to grayish streaks, the wood warped by years of weather. Its once bright sign, House of Laughs, hung crooked, one bulb still clinging to life, buzzing faintly. By day, I imagined it had been harmless fun, warped mirrors that made you tall, short, fat, thin. But at night, when the midway lay silent and the rides slouched like sleeping giants, the funhouse looked more like a mausoleum. I dreaded the first night I'd have to check it after 1 a.m. The third night started like the others. Lock the gates, patrol the grounds, keep my head down. By 12:50, I found myself drifting closer to the funhouse. Something about it pulled at me. The door was boarded but loose, a faded tarp thrown across the entrance like an afterthought. I tugged it tighter, telling myself that would be enough. At 1:10, I made my second sweep. The midway lights had long since gone out, leaving only my flashlight beam cutting thin lines through the dark. That's when I heard it. A low hum. At first I thought it was power lines overhead, but the sound was coming from the funhouse itself. A vibration, like the walls were thrumming with some energy that shouldn't exist in rotting wood. I told myself not to look. The rule was clear. Never look into the funhouse mirrors after 1 a.m. And yet, I stepped closer. Inside, the air felt colder. Dust shifted beneath my boots, stirred by no wind. The smell hit me next musty, like damp fabric left in a sealed trunk. My flashlight beam fell across cracked glass and warped reflections. The mirrors lined both walls, tall and narrow, their surfaces dulled with age. My reflection wavered in the nearest one, stretched too thin. I avoided its gaze and kept moving. The hum deepened. It wasn't just sound anymore, it was inside me, pressing against my ribs, vibrating my teeth. And then I made the mistake. I looked. At 1:12 exactly, my eyes caught my reflection dead on. It wasn't me. Oh, It looked like me, same jacket, same tired eyes. But the way it moved was wrong. I lifted my hand to scratch my neck. The reflection didn't. Instead, it smiled. A slow, deliberate curl of the mouth that never reached the eyes. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Then tap. The sound was faint but unmistakable. My reflection's knuckles rapped against the inside of the glass, like it was testing the surface between us. I staggered back, nearly dropping my flashlight. The smile widened. Its teeth looked too sharp. Too many. Then, both hands pressed flat against the mirror. Its lips moved, silently forming words I couldn't hear. My own voice whispered in my head, "Let me in." I tore the tarp from the doorway and threw it back over the mirrors, stumbling into the night air. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear. But the nightmare didn't end at the door, because later, hours later, as I circled the midway, I caught sight of myself again. Not in the funhouse, but in the reflection of a darkened cotton candy machine. My double. Smiling. Then again. In the roller coaster's metal paneling. Grinning. Always grinning. When dawn finally came, I collapsed in the security office chair, the rule sheet clutched like a holy text in my hand. I hadn't broken rule #3 not fully. I hadn't wanted to look. But I did. And something on the other side saw me. And now, it wasn't just trapped in the funhouse mirrors anymore. It was following me everywhere there was glass. By the fourth night, I had started carrying the rule sheet like a talisman. I kept it folded in my breast pocket where I could feel its edges against my skin with every breath. If I pressed my palm there, I could tell myself I was doing it to make sure it hadn't fallen out. But really, I was checking that the lines of black ink still existed, words to hang my life on. Thin as thread, but still thread. The park had moods, I'd learned. Some nights the air felt like damp fabric, heavy but harmless. Others, it was sharp as a blade. That night, the cold up under the pines tasted like metal shavings. My flashlight threw a narrow tunnel of light. Everything outside it seemed to lean closer, listening. The midway was a graveyard of color, sun-faded posters for corn dogs and lemonade. A backdrop of peeling stripes, faces of cartoon animals with their paint washed to chalk. When the wind moved, they gave the illusion of breathing, like the walls themselves were exhaling around me. I finished the midnight gate check early. Both side gates, locked. Service gate behind the tilt-a-whirl, locked. The main gate's chain bit into itself with the stubbornness of new rust. I tugged anyway, twice, and listened to the hollow clank echo out toward the highway. No cars passed. Out here the world ended in pine tree shadows. At 1:30, clouds shouldered over the moon, and the park became a set of silhouettes. The Ferris wheel was a spoked halo with a toothache, and the coaster curled against the sky like a drawn bow waiting to fire. I forced myself to keep walking, to not look at the funhouse windows or anything that could act like one. When glass reflected now, it reflected wrong, too slow, off by a beat, like something was rehearsing being me, and hadn't mastered timing. By 1:55, I was skirting the cotton candy stand, passing the roller coaster's loading bay. The boards creaked under my boots. My breath fogged, and the fog hung strangely, as if reluctant to leave me. I told myself I had 10 minutes until I could sit, write a few lines in the logbook to look official, pour stale coffee, and count down toward dawn. That's when I heard it. A small sound, thin as wire. Crying. It came from somewhere ahead, quiet at first. The kind of soft sobbing that belongs in a bedroom with a nightlight, not a dead amusement park. Rule #4. If a child asks for help in the dark, do not follow them. I stopped so fast the bones in my ankle jarred. The crying cut off, as if whoever was making it had realized they'd been heard. Then, it began again, a little closer. I pinched the rule sheet through my pocket until the edges dug into my skin. "Hello?" I called, because that's what you do when your brain is still trying to solve a problem the human way. "Where are you?" The crying twisted into words. "Mister?" A girl's voice, small, breathless. "Can you help me?" No footsteps, no shuffle of shoes on grit, just the voice, floating out of the dark ahead. I swallowed and took a single step back. "You need to talk to your parents," I said. It sounded stupid and scripted. "Stay where you are. I'll call someone." "I don't know the way," she said. "Please." My flashlight beam shook, jittering across the shuttered prize booths. The cotton candy stand loomed in the cone of light, its window like a sleeping mouth. Under the eaves, something dangled, the frayed end of a streamer, knocking softly against the wood in a wind I couldn't feel. I took another step back. My heel touched the curb of the loading platform, reminding me of where I stood, the coaster station, the rails arcing away into dark. Somewhere above, metal pinged the slow thermal contraction of old steel, or something else, touching it with deliberate care. "You don't have to come," the girl said. She sounded closer now. "Just follow me. I'm right here." The rules said do not follow. They didn't say do not answer. They didn't say do not look. But I had learned the spaces inside the rules are traps. I locked my eyes on the cracked concrete by my boots. I pressed both hands over my breast pocket, as if I could muffle the temptation through the paper. "I can't," I said, and my voice came out hoarse. "I'm not allowed." The crying stopped again. Silence pooled around me, deep and thick, like the midway had sucked all the air out to see what sound would replace it. For a moment I let myself believe that was it, that naming the rule out loud was like spraying holy water on a hot pan. It should sizzle, and then it should stop. Then the girl began to sob harder. It started as a messy, childish weeping shoulders hitching, the kind of cry that leaves hiccups. But quickly it stretched too long, each breathless inhale coming seconds late, the pitch rising in a way no human throat could sustain. The sound ricocheted through the metal of the coaster, ran down the rails, and returned from my left when it had clearly originated on my right. My skin prickled. The hair on my arms lifted as if the night itself were electrifying. "I can't feel my hands," the voice keened. "Please, it hurts." Something rattled behind me, the empty cars in the station. They shivered on the brakes, metal whispering against metal. There was no power to the system. The control box was dark, keys locked in Delaney's desk. Still, the safety bar on the front car jiggled, lifted a fraction, settled back with a hollow clunk. I closed my eyes and pictured the rules exactly as they looked on the page. The typewriter font, the faint coffee ring on the margin. I imagined each line becoming a spine holding me upright. I turned my face toward the cracked lot and spoke to the asphalt. "I'm sorry," I said to no one human. "I can't help you." The crying cut off mid-breath. Silence struck so brutally that for a second I thought I had gone deaf. In the pause, the night made small, unimportant noises, the distant chirp of something alive under the bleachers, the tiny scratch of pine needles dragging themselves in a draft. Then a new sound found me, soft and wrong, the patter of bare feet on concrete. Not running, placed. Step, pause, step. I didn't lift my head. I counted the steps as they drew near and passed me to the right, close enough for weak air to brush my pant leg, close enough for the faint scent to reach me, something sweet at first, then cloying, then sour, like cotton candy left in a trash bag for a week. A whisper grazed my shoulder, the hush of a mouth that didn't know how close to get. "I found you," it breathed. "Now you follow me." I clenched my jaw and said nothing. My hands, still pressed over my pocket, had gone numb. The footsteps continued down the platform stairs. At the base, they paused. I felt the weighting in my teeth. "Come on," it coaxed. Higher now, the vowels stretched. "Don't be mean." Metal above me thrummed. The rails gave a low, mournful groan that rolled over the park. It felt like the structure was breathing in, prefix to a scream. The empty train shuddered in its berth and jerked forward an inch against the locked brake. A second later, something ran along the track far out over the first drop, the faint tremoring of steel that had no business moving. I couldn't help it. I lifted my eyes as far as my boots, reflected in the scuffed toe caps, turned into a warped crescent. I saw the shadow of small legs at the bottom of the stairs. They faced away from me. The calves were wrong, too smooth, as if drawn without knees, and slightly bowed in a way that made my stomach tilt. "Don't you want to help?" the little voice sang. "Don't you want to be good?" The rails hummed higher, gathering over my head like a storm. Something moved along them with speed, too fast for feet, too light for wheels, like laughter that could run. I bit down on my tongue to keep from making any answer at all. The voice changed. The edge crept in. "Mister," it hissed, the childish cadence slipping as if a mask had tugged askew. I said follow. I looked left, away from the stairs, toward the midway. In the darkened window of the cotton candy stand, my reflection stood. He wasn't looking at me. His chin was tilted toward the base of the coaster stairs, mouth pressed thin, eyes wide and bright with fear. Slowly, deliberately, My reflection shook his head. I obeyed him, me not because it made sense, but because it matched the rule I already knew. I stared into the cracked paint of the stand's trim and waited. The smell of spoiled sugar thickened until I could taste rot on the back of my tongue. The footsteps came back up, closer this time. They stopped right in front of me, near enough for the hem of something to brush my boot. My light, held low at my side, picked out a triangle of fabric, pink, ribbed like a sweater, smeared at the edge with a darker shade that shouldn't have been glossy. "Last chance," it said, and the voice came from too high. I kept my gaze down. I counted my breaths. On the third, I said, "No." The word fell and shattered the small stillness we had held between us. The crying started again, but now it came from everywhere, pinballing off the coaster's steel. The sound surged in a circle around me, and as it did, the train gave another impossible inch. Metal ratcheting, then another. The platform boards vibrated. Screws murmured in their holes. "Please," the girl wailed in 40 places at once. "Mister, please, it's so dark." My knees wanted to buckle. I felt the old animal urge to fix the crying, to go where the child was and end the noise. But under that urge, cold and clean, was the knowledge that none of this was mine to fix. The rules weren't about kindness. They were about surviving the night. "Delaney," I said, too quiet for anyone but me to hear. Saying his name was like tugging a thread back to the world. "Delaney, Delaney, Delaney." The sobs pitched higher, and then like a needle lifted from a record, the noise skipped. In its place came giggling, children, plural, bubbling with delight. The laugh rolled along the rails and out across the lot, up toward the lift hill, and for an instant I felt the urge to clap my hands over my ears, to obey Rule #6 early. But the laughter passed like a wave without breaking. The presence in front of me withdrew. One step. Two. "Mean," the voice whispered, low and thick and pleased with itself. "Mean means mine." The steps receded down the stairs. At the bottom, something scraped. The scent of sugar rot pulled away into the dark like a thread being reeled. I stood there for a long time after the sounds died, 5 minutes or 50. When I finally moved, my legs were pins and needles. I turned in slow sections, making the world come back piece by piece. The cotton candy window showed me my face blanched, jaw clenched, a man trying not to bite through his own tongue. The reflection didn't smile. For once, it looked like me. I finished the round numb, walking the perimeter while the pines ticked and whispered to each other. The Ferris wheel's top car made its slow, thoughtful sway. I looked at the operator's booth. No one waited there. I raised my hand anyway, a confused compulsion, and let it drop when nothing moved in return. Inside the security office, I wrote in the logbook with a hand that couldn't decide whether it was shaking. 158-220. Coaster platform. Report of child's voice, crying. Did not pursue. Train movement with no power. I stopped, pen hovering, then crossed out. Report of. There had been no report. There had been me and something that didn't wear shoes and a sound that taught the steel how to laugh. I didn't sleep. I watched the gray smear of morning gather behind the blinds. When daylight finally took the color out of the shadows, I went back to the coaster because part of me needed proof that something existed outside my head. Dew had settled in the night, beating on the rails and the paint-chipped station. The concrete at the bottom of the stairs held a dark arc, like something wet had been dragged there and had stained the dust. Beyond that, marks. Not shoe prints, not bare feet. Tracks. 2 parallel lines pressed into the grit, too smooth for tires, too narrow. They crossed the lot toward the service gate and faded where the concrete broke into gravel. I followed them to the chain-link fence. The padlock was in place, the chain threaded through twice for good measure. On the inside of the fence, at knee height, the metal links were rubbed clean of rust in 2 parallel smears, no wider than a hand. Something had gone through without opening anything at all. Delaney found me staring at the marks. He looked older than he had the day before, as if the night had drawn a thumbnail under his skin and pulled. He didn't ask what I was doing. He looked at the rails, at the station, at my face. "You heard her?" he said. "I didn't follow," I said, and hated the need in my voice. "Good." He scrubbed a knuckle along his jaw, eyes on the parallel shines in the fence. They change the tricks every few years. She's been a child a while now. Before that, it was a teenager with a broken ankle, crawling. I've seen a grandmother with groceries. I've seen a dog. He paused, and his mouth pressed into a line that tried to be a smile and failed. They don't care what works. They care that something does. What happens if someone follows? He stared at the service road beyond the fence, where the gravel thinned into scrub. You won't like the answer, he said. Then, softer. No one who follows walks back. We stood there until the sun found our shoulders and warmed nothing. A crow watched us from the top of the sign that still promised funnel cakes, head cocked, as if it expected more. When I finally headed back to the office, I paused at the cotton candy stand. In the glass, which was less glass than grime and memory now, my reflection had returned to its usual almost me. But as I shifted my weight, the glass caught a tiny, brilliant shape inside itself. A trick of light. A pink sweater, swinging as if someone small were turning away. I blinked, and it was gone. I refolded the rules sheet along the old creases until it made a hard rectangle against my chest. I tried to take comfort from its weight and couldn't. Not quite. Because I understood something new about the rules that morning. They weren't just instructions. They were bargains that admitted the thing across from you exists. And once you admit it exists, it never pretends otherwise again. That night, when the hour crept toward 2, I avoided the coaster. I thought I could starve whatever lived on its tracks by giving it no audience. I cut down the far side of the midway instead, past the prize booths with their sunburned stuffed bears. Something rasped over the canvas roof as I passed nails or twigs, dragging slow. I didn't look up. Halfway to the office, air shifted. The pines hushed. Somewhere behind me, the coaster gave a long, slow, delighted rattle. The laughter had found me anyway. I walked faster. My flashlight found the office door, the chipped paint, the latch Delaney kept saying he'd fix. Before I could reach for it, the radio on my belt crackled. I jumped so hard the light went wild. Static. Then, threaded through it, the unmistakable sound of a child crying. "Mister," the radio whispered in a frequency no human throat could hit. I dropped my hand. A tiny giggle. "Will you help me pick it up?" My thumb hovered over the push to talk. The urge to answer it, the reflex to be human to a voice, was a physical pain. Instead, I reached with my other hand, opened the office door, and stepped inside. I set the radio gently on the desk, backed away from it twice, and shut the door with care. Out the window, the midway sat in pleasant, deadly stillness. The radio kept sobbing to itself like a toy with half-dead batteries. I pulled my chair to the far corner, sat with my hands under my thighs, and watched the light creep over the blinds until the crying finally faded to a hiss. When dawn came, the gate chains were frosting with dew again. In the lot, faint marks trailed across the concrete. A double set of narrow tracks that began where nothing stood and ended where nothing waited. I didn't follow them. I had learned to stop giving the dark the satisfaction. Outside, beyond the pines, a daybird tried a note, reconsidered, and tried again. I breathed with it, a ragged echo. I told myself I was still here, rule by rule. And then I noticed the new thing. Small prints in the dew near the office door, turning in tight circles, as if someone had waited there a long time, pouting. Each toe mark was too round, too perfect. Each heel was just a suggestion, like a painter had hurried that part. They stopped abruptly at the threshold, where the doormat's bristles had been scissored short in 2 neat stripes. A child couldn't have done that. Something pretending to be a child could. I locked the door and didn't unlock it until Delaney's knock. When I let him in, he took one look at the tracks and didn't ask a question. He just picked up the radio, turned it off, and set it face down so the speaker stared the desk. "You're doing fine," he said, "for someone new. How long until I'm not new?" He didn't answer. He stared out the window toward the coaster and said, without turning, "There's a trick to living with it. Don't make it yours. When it cries, hear it as weather." I wanted to say weather isn't cruel, but we both knew that wasn't true. Not in Missouri, not anywhere. That night, I made my rounds with my eyes on the ground, practicing how to listen to a child's voice like thunder in July. Inevitable, explainable, dangerous. Only if you go stand on the roof to watch it. It helped, a little, until, at the far end of the midway, I passed the photo booth, and the glass door showed me not my face, but the small pink sleeve of a sweater, tugging stubbornly at the edge of the frame, as if it were caught in the world and almost freed. The sleeve slipped away. Behind me, somewhere on the tracks, something began to run. And this time, it laughed in a voice that wasn't a child's anymore. By the fifth night, I had gotten used to carrying dread the way you carry a heavy jacket. You don't like it, but you stop noticing the weight. The rules had woven themselves into my thoughts. Every patrol was a checklist. Every sound, every flicker, every stray reflection, I measured against the sheet folded in my pocket. But the clowns, they were different. They weren't just another rule. They were a presence. The clown animatronics stood in a shallow alcove along the midway, a little stage built into the prize booths. Back in the 80 seconds, they must have been an attraction, bright costumes, painted faces, jerking arms to call customers closer. By the time I arrived, their colors had faded to sickly pastels. Their plastic faces had warped slightly from heat, leaving their painted grins looking melted, stretched too far across. There were 4 of them, lined shoulder to shoulder. Each one held a stiff arm out, frozen mid-wave. Their glassy eyes stared over the heads of a crowd that hadn't existed in decades. At night, with only my flashlight for company, they looked like corpses lined up for inspection. Rule #5. Keep the clown animatronics powered if they shut off. Restart them immediately. I hated that rule. More than the mirrors. More than the crying child. Because the clowns were already wrong before anything happened. Wrong in the way their painted mouths sagged. Wrong in the way their joints creaked if the wind shifted. Wrong in the way you could almost believe their eyes blinked when you weren't looking directly. But I obeyed. Every night, I checked the breakers behind their alcove, made sure the faint hum of power kept them alive. Their arms twitched in endless little jerks, heads rotating side to side in the laziest of loops. And I told myself it was just machines. Old, ugly machines. That night, the storm came. Thunder had been building all evening, a slow percussion in the sky that never resolved into rain. By midnight, the clouds pressed so low, the pines bent under them. When lightning finally broke, it lit the park in white for a heartbeat. Ferris wheel looming like a crown of bone, coaster rails glowing like veins. Then the power flickered. The midway lights cut out. The humming bulbs died, and the clowns went still. I froze in place. My flashlight beam fell across them. For the first time, they weren't waving. Their arms hung stiff at their sides. Their painted mouths gaped open like something had taken the air out of them. A sick panic clawed my chest. The rule hammered in my head. If they shut off, restart them immediately. I bolted for the breaker box behind their alcove. My boots splashed through shallow puddles, rain finally starting to fall in greasy sheets. The metal panel was slick under my hands. I yanked it open and slammed the switch back up. The lights flickered on, and the clowns moved. Not their jerky, mechanical routines. Not the predictable swing of heads and arms. No, they turned, all 4 at once, their plastic necks creaking in perfect unison, their glassy eyes fixed on me. And then, impossibly, their lids slid shut, blinked before reopening. My breath stuttered in my throat. My body told me to run, but my legs held. Because if the rules were lifelines, then I had done my job. I had restarted them. One clown's head tilted slightly, a broken marionette gesture. Its jaw clicked open, and I swear, on the wet air of that storm, I heard it whisper, "Don't let us sleep again." The words were dry, rasping, as though forced through plastic lungs. The lights buzzed louder, and just like that, the clowns snapped back into their looping animations, arms jerking, heads swiveling. But every so often, when the lightning flashed across the midway, I could swear their faces shifted mid-blink, not smiling, not grinning, begging. I didn't sleep when my shift ended. I didn't even sit down. I watched them through the security office window until the sun rose, until the storm broke into gray drizzle. When Delaney came in, I asked him, straight out, what happens if the clowns stay off? He didn't meet my eyes. You don't want to know. They spoke, I pressed. One of them told me not to let them sleep. What does that mean? Delaney rubbed his face with both hands, like a man too tired to lie properly. Finally, he said, they're not asking you. They're warning you. I learned to measure the night in vibrations. The pines had one kind. Their needles hissed and ticked in little runs down the trunks, a dry whisper that never changed. The rides had another, a buried metallic ache that woke when the temperature dropped, a slow settling that carried through the ground and up into your bones. After a while, your body became a tuning fork for what belonged and what didn't. The laughter did not belong. It came first as a shiver along the coaster rails, a tremble so faint I mistook it for wind. But the trees weren't moving. The storm had wrung the sky clean and left it motionless. The air over Hollow Pines had the held-breath quality of a house after a fight. I stopped on the midway and pivoted, letting my light fall away from the coaster. I had learned that illumination kept some things honest, but invited others closer. Better to aim the beam at the asphalt and listen. The rails gave a soft, almost coy rattle. Then, far off along the first drop, something tapped as if knuckles had wrapped metal and liked the sound. Rule #6. If you hear laughter on the roller coaster tracks, turn away and cover your ears. I folded the rules into myself, the way a drowning person folds air into their chest. Turn away, cover ears, do not engage. I turned my back to the coaster. I pressed my palms flat against my ears until I could feel my own pulse. The blood noise was loud, a bass drum behind the cartilage. It almost drowned the world entirely. Almost, because through the pressure of my hands, through the dull thud of my heart, I heard the first laugh. It sounded like a child who'd just gotten away with something small, a stolen cookie, a prank that worked, a little secret glee. The laugh skittered along the rails from the far hill to the turn above the midway and settled there, the way a bird might choose a fence post to rest on. Another voice joined it. Lower. Not amused. Hungry. They overlapped and separated, twining around each other with an awful familiarity, like a duet that had been practiced for years on hard metal. Every part of me wanted to glance over my shoulder just a peek to learn the shape of the thing making that sound. The rules are cruel in that way. They only forbid what you are most compelled to do. I clenched my jaw and waited as the laughter drew closer, bubbling along the track supports, filling the night like shaken soda. Something heavy hit an expansion joint. The rails rang out. The laughter surged, multiplied dozens now, some bright and high, some wet and subterranean, all braided into a single advancing joy. The concrete under my boots began to tremble in a sympathetic rhythm, as if the ground wanted to join in. I squeezed harder. The pressure went sharp. Pain bloomed. I welcomed it. Pain meant I was still in my body and not inside the sound. The laughter stopped. Not faded. Stopped. Silence vaulted up around me. In that blank, I could hear the tiny sounds again, the tick of cooling bolts, the whisper of drip water finding the edge of a roof. Silence is supposed to be safe. Here, it was the space where something changes its mind. A breath passed. 2. Then, the whole track shook. The vibration jumped from the far lift hill to the station in a single elastic run, like something long and light and merciless had sprinted the length of the coaster in an instant. Metal sang. The sound was so big my hands couldn't contain it. It poured around my palms and into my ears and down my throat, until it sat fizzing behind my sternum. Instinct broke me. I looked, not all the way, just a slice over my right shoulder, enough to put the loading platform at the edge of my vision. In that wrong, borrowed angle, I saw the blur. White-gray figures too pale for human skin, too quick for human joints streaked along the rails in single file. There were at least 8 of them, maybe 10. Their bodies compressed into a sprint that looked like a film spooled too fast. They leaned forward as they ran, not like athletes, but like needle-nosed animals tasting a scent on the wind. Their limbs bent at the wrong points and then snapped straight with a whiplash efficiency that made me think of folding chairs being opened and closed. They were laughing as they ran, and the laughter was the running. The sound synced with their footfalls or whatever passed for feet so perfectly that I couldn't tell which caused the other. I yanked my gaze back to the dark of the pavement and rammed my palms to my ears again, shame burning up my neck. The rules don't leave much room for mistakes, but sometimes they forgive glances. Sometimes. The procession hit the big curve above the midway and the noise peaked. A chorus of delight and effort, bodies and voices moving as one. Something stumbled. One of the pale blurs caught its own momentum wrong and pitched sideways. There was no thud, no scraping tumble. The figure simply folded at the edge of the track and vanished in midair like a curtain had dropped over it. The laughter didn't pause to mourn. It compressed to jump the gap and rushed on. The urge to scream hit me so hard I tasted copper. I held my breath until my vision dotted and counted 3 beats against the drum of my heart. On the 3rd, I let air out slow, a thread I could follow back to control. The parade reached the station and shivered through it, a grin curving around metal, then shot back up the lift hill as if gravity were a story it told to other rides as a joke. Midway bulbs. long dead, flickered in a faint pulse in time with the movement a heartbeat running beneath the park. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the laughter snapped off. The rails hummed in the afterglow of motion. A few bolts twitched like muscles, then settled. My ears rang with the echo of what I hadn't quite heard. I kept my palms pressed in place. When nothing came for a long time, I peeled them away slowly, as if removing bandages. The night crept back in around the edges. Insects restarting their business. Leaves deciding there was wind after all. I stood there for a minute that might have been 10 and let my guts stop climbing my throat. My hands shook in a way that didn't feel like fear so much as leftover electricity. Behind me, the Ferris wheel creaked. A memory tried to stand up inside me, the silhouette in the booth raising a hand, and I almost looked up to check if he watched. Instead, I bowed my head and whispered, "Still here." It was half a prayer, half a roll call. My radio crackled. Static first, then the thin, stretched voice I'd learned to ignore. "Mister," it breathed, the word like floss between teeth. "They're coming back around. Don't you want to see?" I turned the volume down until the voice fell into the white hiss of its own making and clipped the radio back onto my belt backward, so the speaker faced my hip. At the security office, I wrote in the logbook with a wary plainness, 2:45, 3, 5. Laughter on coaster. Rule observed, mostly. Multiple entities, seen, peripheral. One fell, no impact noted. Track vibration sustained. Then I added what I hadn't wanted to admit. Looked briefly. No direct eye contact. I wanted to be honest for a future version of me who might die because I pretended to be braver than I was. Delaney came in just before 3, summoned by the storm or the same nervous compass that had dragged me to the window. He found me standing with the blinds tilted, so I could watch the coaster without giving the glass a chance to gather me. He didn't ask. He never did. He put a coffee on the desk beside my elbow and leaned his shoulder to the jamb. "They ran?" he said after a moment, as if we had been in the middle of a conversation and were only now finding the next sentence. I nodded. "How many?" 8, maybe 10. "That's about right." He sipped, grimaced at the taste, and set the cup down without drinking again. "You covered your ears?" "I did." I hesitated. I looked for a second. "Everyone does," he said. The sentence landed with the weight of dozens of shifts and hundreds of bad decisions. That's why it's a rule. If it wasn't hard to keep, it wouldn't be written down. "What are they?" I asked. The question felt childish even as it left me. "The laughing ones." He watched the black shape of the lift hill without blinking. "Depends on who you ask," he said. The old maintenance foreman, they called him Cutter. He said they were static ghosts, just noise that learned to wear a shape. Dee from ticketing, she used to bring her own coffee, thought they were the crowd the park wishes it still had. All that attention, all that joy burned into the steel like seasoning on a cast iron pan. "And you?" "Doesn't matter what I think. The rules don't care about opinions." He paused, then added, softer, "But I think there's something that found a track, and realized tracks are loops. It likes loops." He picked up the coffee again, tried another drink, and made the same face. "If you hear it twice in a night, stay in the office," he said, businesslike again. "They double back sometimes. People get curious on the second pass." I thought of the one that had fallen away and left no sound behind. Where do they go if they miss? He didn't answer for a long time. When he did, the words had the careful shape of a man putting planks over a hole. "If you need to know that, you waited too long to cover your ears." The radio on my hip decided to be brave and hissed. A thin giggle, smothered quickly. Delaney glanced at it without surprise. "They like a microphone," he said. "Anything that lets them vibrate louder." After he left, I sat with the coffee and let it go cold without drinking. I didn't want the taste of the night in my mouth longer than I could help. At 3:28, the tracks murmured again. The sound rolled like distant thunder, too far to be a rule breaker, but close enough to make my skin think it remembered fear. I laid the rules on the desk and flattened them with my palm. The paper had gone soft at the creases. The coffee ring on the corner had widened into a bruise. I waited for the second run to build and break. It didn't. The rails sighed and settled. When I stepped back outside, the park had returned to its practiced stillness. That's something you learn here. Stillness is a skill. It has technique. It makes you forget the moment before until you doubt your own notes. I walked the far perimeter, avoiding fences and windows. avoiding anything that might show me a version of myself that wanted to make a different choice. The prize booth curtains lifted in a small toss, the way fabric does when someone you can't see brushes past. The Ferris wheel operator's booth was a black square with nothing to offer. I raised my hand anyway and felt stupid when no answering motion came. At 3:50, the laughter returned. It didn't start at the far hill this time. It rose from under the station, as if something had learned to use the ride like a drum and was now thumping its way up through the wood. I had already turned before I realized I'd moved. I faced the cotton candy stand, stared hard at a sun-faded poster for lemon shake-ups, and clamped my hands over my ears. The laughter swelled to a roar. The track shook. Small things let go of their dust. Chips of paint, crumbs of old snack salt, and rattled across concrete. Between my palms, the sound was a living thing, forcing its way through the seams of my fingers, trying to colonize the space behind my eyes. Something stopped right behind me. I felt it as a pressure in the air, the way you can feel a truck pass even before your bones record the noise. It stood so close, the heat of it, if that was heat-pressed, the sweat on the back of my neck cold. The laugh near my right ear cut to a single, testing exhale. I didn't move. I tried to pull my shoulders down out of my ears and failed. A long second held. Then a small, dry breath tickled the hair behind my jaw. A voice, if you could call the friction of air against a seam. A voice said, with the perfect, cruel mimicry of a child sharing a secret, "Peek." My teeth clicked together with the force of keeping them shut. I didn't open my eyes wider. I didn't narrow them. I stared at the poster until the lemons blurred into static. I counted to 7 because 7 is a number that feels like you could finish it if you had to. On 6, the presence moved. It didn't step. It uncoiled, retreating up and away with the fluidity of a ribbon snapping back through a ring. The rails accepted it with a purr. The laughter resumed farther up the line, this time sharply delighted, like something pleased that the game could continue. I waited until the last tremor hid in the screws. Then, hands still over my ears, I backed 3 paces, and only then turned my body to put the station to my left, where my peripheral could watch for motion without giving my eyes a target to lock on. The night felt thinner now, stretched, the way a balloon looks right before it pops. No third pass came. At 4, the sky over the pines began to bleach. Birds tested the morning the way a tongue tests a chipped tooth. I went to the station and stood with a conservator's caution, as if my shadow might smear something important. Dust had written its own logbook during the night. Waves of it lay stacked on the platform boards, run into little crescents that traveled the same direction as the track. Bits of rust dusted the rails like paprika. In one spot where the figure had fallen, the dust had been disturbed in a clean oval, 8 inches across, as if an absence had landed there and made a print of nothing. I squatted and touched the oval. The wood was colder inside the shape, as if a refrigerator had been left open above it. My finger came away damp with the dew that hadn't fallen anywhere else. By the service ladder, something else had happened. The second pass, the one that approached from under the station, had shaken a nut loose. It lay in the gutter, bright at the threads, where the rust hadn't had time to find it again. I picked it up. It felt like a coin, you shouldn't spend. Delaney found me holding it and sighed like a man who had seen the same piece of metal at the end of too many nights. "They'll rattle this place apart if you let them," he said. "Laugh something long enough and it stops being funny." "Is there a rule for when the ride fails?" I asked. "There should be," he said, "but rules are written by survivors, and if the ride fails while they're out there..." He didn't finish the thought. He took the nut from my palm, weighed it, and pocketed it like a worry stone. "We'll check the bolts at dusk. Bring Cutter's old torque wrench." We walked back toward the office together, our steps out of sync enough to prove we were not a single thing. On the way, we passed the clown alcove. Their arms still jerked, their heads still turned. One blinked, slow as a clock. I pretended not to see. At the door, Delaney paused. "You did all right," he said, which was as close to praise as I'd heard him get. "You kept your ears covered. You looked a little. You didn't look enough. That's the job. What happens if you do look enough?" He stared across the midway toward the lift hill, where the first tan of daylight made the steel look almost gentle. "You start laughing," he said, "and you don't stop." He left me with the logbook, the rules, and a cooling room. I sat and wrote again in the careful, boring hand I'd been cultivating. To 2:45 first pass. to 3 50-second pass closer. Rule kept, presence proximate, whisper at ear, peek, no compliance. I added, because the truth needed somewhere to live, wanted to. Then I put the pen down and laid the rules in the center of the desk, as if they were a patient and I a doctor who could not do more than monitor. On my way out at shift's end, I stopped under the Ferris wheel and looked up. The top car moved in a wind I couldn't feel. The operator's booth sat empty, a square of black where a silhouette had once lifted a hand. I waved anyway. For a moment too long, nothing moved. Then the booth darkened, like someone had stepped into a deeper shade inside it. I did not see a figure. I just felt the park notice me. I lowered my hand. My ears still rang. In that ringing, I heard the laughter again, faint as memory, threaded with something like approval and something like promise. I told myself I had kept the rule. I told myself that would be enough. And somewhere in the steel, something that liked loops learned my name by the shape of the sound I made when I tried not to scream. By the time my 7th night rolled around, the park and I had come to an understanding. I followed the rules, and it let me leave when the sun came up. It wasn't peace, not exactly. More like a truce neither side trusted. But that night, the Ferris wheel decided to remind me that truces can be broken. The Ferris wheel hadn't turned in decades. The cars were locked with rust. Their paint faded into a uniform gray-green like mold. The operator's booth sat at the base, a squat little shelter of wood and glass, its door hanging open on a single hinge. Every night, as I passed, I kept my distance. I'd glance up, never for long, and sometimes the top car would sway. Sometimes I thought I saw something inside it, sometimes not. But the rule was clear. Always wave back at the Ferris wheel operator, even though no one is up there. Until then, I'd done it like muscle memory. A quick lift of the hand, like a man saluting a ghost, then keep walking. But that night, the air pressed thick against the park. Not storm thick like the night of the clowns, not sharp like the night of the crying child. It was the hush before confession, when someone decides to finally tell you a thing they've been carrying too long. I was halfway across the midway when I felt it. That weight, the sense that eyes had found me. I stopped. Slowly, against every instinct, I turned toward the Ferris wheel. The top car was rocking, a slow, deliberate sway, and in the operator's booth, silhouetted against the weak glow of a lightning-burnt bulb that shouldn't have been working, a figure sat, not standing, not shifting, sitting in the chair, upright, watching. My mouth went dry. The rules had never said what to do if he appeared, only that I had to wave. So I did. I lifted my hand. For a moment, nothing. Then the figure raised its own hand, a mirror of mine, and held it there. The gesture was careful, almost reverent. Then the figure nodded once and vanished. Not turned away, not faded, gone. The booth sat empty again, the bulb above it flickering into dark. I stood frozen in place, my arm still half raised. When I finally lowered it, the midway seemed different. Not lighter, not darker, just aware. I finished the patrol on autopilot, the rules thrumming like a song in my chest. When I returned to the office, Delaney was there, sorting through a stack of incident reports older than me. He saw my face and knew. "You waved," he said. "He was there," I whispered. "In the booth. I saw him." Delaney didn't flinch. He didn't laugh. He just nodded, slow, like a man waiting for a storm he always knew would come. "He used to be real," Delaney said finally. "Back in '89. Name was Gary. Everyone called him Gaz. He was the operator here. Good man. Never missed a shift." "What happened?" I asked. Delaney's jaw tightened. "Coaster derailment. Kids died. Management blamed him. He stayed until the investigation closed. Then, he gestured toward the booth with 2 fingers, as if that explained everything. They found him up there one morning, still in uniform, hand on the lever. Heart just stopped. The silence stretched. The rain outside tapped the roof like nails. He still keeps watch, Delaney said. Keeps the ride safe. That's why we wave. Not for respect, not for memory, for bargain. He sees us. He remembers who's supposed to be here, who belongs, who doesn't. My skin prickled cold. And if you don't wave back? Delaney stirred powdered creamer as if it might organize his thoughts. Not who, how many. The pines had eyes. So the gate kept moving. Some years it was a man with a badge. Some years a woman in white with a clicker. Some years nobody at all, just a shadow near the entrance. Waving was how you told whatever did the counting that you belonged to the tally. He handed me an undrinkable coffee and went to argue with the walkie batteries. I took the cup back to the desk and returned to the files. The 1,950 seconds is where Hollow Pines became the place I recognized. Permanent foundations poured for the rides, the carousel upgraded, the Ferris wheel made taller, a funhouse with mirrors from Belgium that an owner bragged about in a flyer. There were expense reports for clown automats and a brochure with an artist's rendering of 4 cheerful faces above the caption, "Awake all day to wave at you." Tucked into that brochure was a napkin the white had aged to nicotine, and on it, in fountain pen ink that had bled into the fibers, "Do not cut power at once. Bleed them down slow. They hate waking up hungry." Whoever wrote the rules, they never thought of them as superstition. They wrote like a cook, noting oven settings, practical, matter of fact, an intimacy with heat and timing that only comes from burns healed long ago. I began to hear a rhythm in the records. Every time the park expanded, new ride, brighter lights, there would be a cluster of incident reports, small, then bigger. The language repeated with the obsessive neatness of a man filling out the same form for years. Guest complained of dizziness near carousel. Clatter reported on coaster at 2:10. Mirror hall closed for repairs. Glass stress noises. Youth missing then found near highway. Then a lull. Then a note in different handwriting. Added 1 gate lock. Added wave. The more you gave them, the more they wanted. The more you counted, the more they counted you. The police reports from the 1,970 seconds had been copied on a machine that left every letter a little ghost beside itself. I squinted until my temples ached. 2 kids, 16 and 17, skipped the line after closing for a dare. One broke his ankle on the stairs to the coaster platform. The other went to get help. By the time anyone reached the injured boy, he was gone. The report used soft words. Left the scene, presumed assisted by peers, later cited in town. A second report, same night, penned by an officer who had served long enough not to lie to himself. No tracks. Fresh dew, unbroken. Handprint found on inside of fence at child height. Smudged, turned wrong way. There were more. A woman who insisted the Ferris wheel turned 1 notch, even with the motor dead. A man who punched a funhouse mirror and cut his knuckles on glass that didn't crack. A little boy who went missing at 9:15 p.m. and was found at 9:16 p.m., standing at the entrance with a ticket from the 1,930 seconds in his hand. Ink fresh, crying quietly because the lady with the round face had told him not to speak to the man in the blue hat. There was no lady in uniform with a round face in the park's history. There was a painted clown on a poster with that exact face. After the 80 seconds, the paper thinned, but the rules thickened. Typed sheets, duplicates, laminated copies pinned in places employees couldn't pretend not to see. That's when the operator became a capital letter in incident narratives. The first line in black ink under every night manager's log. Wave. I found a battered binder marked Archive Do Not Remove hidden behind a stack of unopened safety posters. Inside, a medley. Memos that never got sent. Letters never mailed. A Polaroid of a maintenance crew eating donuts with grease on their hands. Slid into the back pocket. A notebook with a leather cover gone bald at the corners. On the first page, in pencil that alternated heavy and tentative, "To whoever takes my keys when I don't come back." The writer never signed his name, but he spoke like a man who had climbed rides in the rain and known which bolts to trust with his life. He called the coaster by the name no one used on maps, the nickname that belonged to men who had tightened its spine, Whippoorwill. He called the carousel the Herd. He didn't discuss the funhouse as a building, but as a mouth. His rules were the same as ours. His reasons were worse. The Herd likes a crowd, but not a crush. Lights them up, and they'll show off. Empty them out too fast, and they get mean. The glass eats eyes first. Don't give it yours. Tracks laugh best at a throat's soft place. Cover it with your hands, and you can pretend it's your ears. Clowns are alarm clocks. They don't sleep, so we can. If they sleep, we sleep inside them. I read the last line 3 times, convincing myself I'd hallucinated it. If they sleep, we sleep inside them. Delaney stirred powdered creamer as if it might organize his thoughts. Not who, how many. The pines had eyes, so the gate kept moving. Some years it was a man with a badge. Some years a woman in white with a clicker. Some years nobody at all, just a shadow near the entrance. Waving was how you told whatever did the counting that you belonged to the tally. He handed me an undrinkable coffee and went to argue with the walkie batteries. I took the cup back to the desk and returned to the files. The 1,950 seconds is where Hollow Pines became the place I recognized. Permanent foundations poured for the rides, the carousel upgraded, the Ferris wheel made taller, a funhouse with mirrors from Belgium that an owner bragged about in a flyer. There were expense reports for clown automats, and a brochure with an artist's rendering of 4 cheerful faces above the caption, "Awake all day to wave at you." Tucked into that brochure was a napkin the white had aged to nicotine, and on it, in fountain pen ink that had bled into the fibers, "Do not cut power at once. Bleed them down slow. They hate waking up hungry." Whoever wrote the rules, they never thought of them as superstition. They wrote like a cook, noting oven settings, practical, matter of fact, an intimacy with heat and timing that only comes from burns healed long ago. I began to hear a rhythm in the records. Every time the park expanded, new ride, brighter lights, there would be a cluster of incident reports, small, then bigger. The language repeated with the obsessive neatness of a man filling out the same form for years. Guest complained of dizziness near carousel. Clatter reported on coaster at 2:10. Mirror hall closed for repairs. Glass stress noises. Youth missing then found near highway. Then a lull. Then a note in different handwriting. Added 1 gate lock. Added wave. The more you gave them, the more they wanted. The more you counted, the more they counted you. The police reports from the 1,970 seconds had been copied on a machine that left every letter a little ghost beside itself. I squinted until my temples ached. 2 kids, 16 and 17, skipped the line after closing for a dare. One broke his ankle on the stairs to the coaster platform. The other went to get help. By the time anyone reached the injured boy, he was gone. The report used soft words. Left the scene, presumed assisted by peers, later cited in town. A second report, same night, penned by an officer who had served long enough not to lie to himself. No tracks. Fresh dew, unbroken. Handprint found on inside of fence at child height. Smudged, turned wrong way. There were more. A woman who insisted the Ferris wheel turned 1 notch, even with the motor dead. A man who punched a funhouse mirror and cut his knuckles on glass that didn't crack. A little boy who went missing at 9:15 p.m. and was found at 9:16 p.m., standing at the entrance with a ticket from the 1,930 seconds in his hand. Ink fresh, crying quietly because the lady with the round face had told him not to speak to the man in the blue hat. There was no lady in uniform with a round face in the park's history. There was a painted clown on a poster with that exact face. After the 80 seconds, the paper thinned, but the rules thickened. Typed sheets, duplicates, laminated copies pinned in places employees couldn't pretend not to see. That's when the operator became a capital letter in incident narratives. The first line in black ink under every night manager's log. Wave. I found a battered binder marked Archive Do Not Remove hidden behind a stack of unopened safety posters. Inside, a medley. Memos that never got sent, letters never mailed. A Polaroid of a maintenance crew eating donuts with grease on their hands. Slid into the back pocket. A notebook with a leather cover gone bald at the corners. On the first page, in pencil that alternated heavy and tentative, "To whoever takes my keys when I don't come back." The writer never signed his name, but he spoke like a man who had climbed rides in the rain and known which bolts to trust with his life. He called the coaster by the name no one used on maps, the nickname that belonged to men who had tightened its spine, Whippoorwill. He called the carousel the Herd. He didn't discuss the funhouse as a building, but as a mouth. His rules were the same as ours. His reasons were worse. The Herd likes a crowd, but not a crush. Lights them up, and they'll show off. Empty them out too fast, and they get mean. The glass eats eyes first. Don't give it yours. Tracks laugh best at a throat's soft place. Cover it with your hands, and you can pretend it's your ears. Clowns are alarm clocks. They don't sleep, so we can. If they sleep, we sleep inside them. I read the last line 3 times, convincing myself I'd hallucinated it. If they sleep, we sleep inside them. I flipped forward. Pages and pages. Men saved by rules. Men lost between lines. Names of workers only their friends would remember. Dates that danced around mine like hungry flies. On a page near the back, a confession smudged by a thumb that had pressed too hard. I cut power quick once. Thought I'd get home faster. They woke up on empty and the midway went, "Wolf." Gary Gaz kept the gate that night. He waved for the both of us. Otherwise, I'd have had my feet run right out from under me. I've told no one until now because saying a thing is how it looks back. Gaz, the operator, the man who had learned to be the park's sentinel even before he became its ghost. The dates lined up. So did the tone. People who owe the dead write with a politeness they don't give the living. I closed the notebook and found my hands were shaking. I set it down gently, like a small animal I didn't want to startle, and looked up at the office door. It stood slightly ajar in the morning draft. Through the crack, the midway watched me with all its practiced stillness. When I lowered my eyes, I saw it. One of the clowns second from the left, the one with the hat that always sat too crooked, had turned. Not much. Not enough to call a movement unless you knew where its gaze normally fell. But now, its eyes pointed just off the line of the midway toward the office door. I thought about the napkin note. Don't cut power at once. I thought about the whisper I'd heard when the storm took the lights. Don't let us sleep again. A ridiculous impulse took me. I stood, walked out, and stood before them. The 4 pastels, with their melted grins. I watched without blinking for a full minute. Their arms jerked. Their heads swept. Then between motions, lid membrane slid down and up in a single, slow blink that was not part of the program. "Your turn," I said, and I didn't know what I meant or who I was speaking to. Back in the office, I kept reading because that's how I stopped my mind from going where the park wanted it to go. The binder's last pockets held the modern era, and the pages got uglier the closer they came to now. A typed incident report with a header that matched ours except for one extra line at the bottom. Rule. Acknowledged by staff? With a box for yes, no. On a page dated 6 years ago, the box was marked no in heavy ink. The narrative below was short. New hire. Dismissed rules. Followed voice. No return. Family notified. Attached to it with a rusting paperclip. A photocopy of a community meeting flyer. Block letters. Public Safety Forum. Hollow Pines Amusement. 2s. 7 p.m. Sheriff's Office. Someone had underlined public safety twice and written in the margin, "They'll never say the word haunted. They'll say liability. We're the difference." There were pamphlets likely printed by some local church in the 90 seconds. "Keep your children safe this summer." With clip art of balloons and a smiling sun, the kinds of shapes that make my teeth hurt now. In thick black text near the bottom, "If you hear a child cry in the dark, alert a staff member. Do not separate from your group." I wondered how many staff members were left to alert. I had been reading for hours. The light outside shifted from silver to the flat white of late morning. Delaney tapped on the doorframe and watched me with an expression between pity and solidarity. "Archives will salt your head," he said. "They fill in gaps you might have been able to step over." "Who kept all this?" I asked. "People like us," he said. "People who knew memory as a tool. People who understood that lore is just safety instructions the lawyers won't sign." "Did we build over a graveyard?" I asked, and meant, who did we offend to deserve this? "No." His answer was prompt, almost relieved. "We built over a stage. The carnival wintered here because this ground brings a crowd even when there isn't one. Some places are loud by nature. We laid a track on the loud and taught it the shape of a loop. Then we learned to count with it." He scratched at the back of his neck and added, "Counting invites, counting back." He left me with that in a folder he thought I ought to see. It included the last known letter from Gaz, the operator, written to a person unnamed, maybe the same maintenance man who'd filled the leather notebook. The envelope had never been sent. It had ridden the drawer's darkness into the present. I didn't keep them safe, not really. But I kept the count honest. Don't let them get clever with jumps. Make them earn every notch. And if you don't see me wave, make sure you wave twice. Once for you and once for me. If I forget you, it's because I'm busy remembering the rails. I slipped the letter back into its envelope, and felt like I had handled a piece of bone. On my way out, because reading isn't living and living meant making rounds again that night, I noticed the smallest change. The office door, which never sat quite square in its frame, scraped differently. The hinge squealed on a pitch a hair higher than yesterday, like the sound had been tuned. And when I turned to lock up, I found the clown with the crooked hat had completed its subtle pivot. It faced the office directly now. I chalked it up to draft and lighting and the way the sun can make a shadow lie. I told myself the animatronics can shift on their tracks when heat expands plastic. I told myself a lot of things because that's what you do with daylight. You stack reasonable explanations until they make a wall the night can't easily climb. Still, when I came back from my shift, I unlocked the office and felt a pressure stupid, like embarrassment that made me say evening to an empty doorway. I waved to the wheel. I did it without looking up. And as I put the rules back into my pocket to make their rectangle against my heart, the sheet felt heavier than paper. It felt like somebody else's hand pressing mine down, reminding me, you only carry this because someone else carried it first. That night the park had the feel of a story that was getting impatient to reach its middle. The laughter held back. The funhouse kept its hum under the floorboards. The carousel rested its teeth. The clowns, awake and dutiful, ticked off their loops. The only thing that moved with intent was the Ferris wheel's top car. One slow nod. I nearly missed. I waved. Not fast, not slow. The kind of motion you use when you see an old man on a porch and know the greeting is part respect, part superstition, part insurance against the bad luck of pretending you don't need either. And I kept hearing the pencil on the bottom of the concession sheet. Little bites, never all at once. They like a show, not a frenzy. Fed steady, counted honest, waved right. That's how we had built our truce. Until the night someone new laughed at the rules. Until the night the park remembered how to be hungry. When I locked the office at dawn, the clown with the crooked hat stood in its old posture again, eyes over the crowd that wasn't there. Maybe heat had softened its neck back into place. Maybe it had been a trick of nerves all along. But I noticed one more thing. A smudge on the office door at elbow height. Faint, greasy, in the shape of a hand that didn't understand the angle of a human wrist. Lore makes you see things. Rules make you keep seeing them even when you want to stop. I wiped the smudge with my sleeve until the wood was clean and told myself that housekeeping counts as bravery when you're working here. By the 9th night, I thought I understood Hollow Pines. Not everything, not nearly, but enough to move through it without dying. The rules had become second nature. My body knew them before my mind did. Don't look, don't follow, don't peek, don't listen, don't let the clowns sleep, always wave. That's why I knew immediately the new guy wasn't going to last. His name was Travis. Delaney brought him in just before my shift started. Introduced him with the same tone you'd use to introduce a borrowed tool. Travis looked barely 20, all swagger in a cheap leather jacket, chewing gum with his mouth open. He had a laugh that carried too far in the empty midway, and when Delaney handed him the typed rules sheet, he read them out loud in a mocking sing-song. Lock the gates, don't ride the carousel, don't stare at the funhouse, don't follow spooky kids. Come on, man. He slapped the paper against his thigh. This is, what, a haunted house gig? Like a gimmick? Delaney didn't even flinch. Read them, follow them, or don't. I'm too old to repeat myself. He turned to me. Pair him with you tonight. Show him the rounds. I wanted to protest, but the look Delaney gave me ended that quick. He wasn't asking me to babysit Travis. He was asking me to watch, to see what happened when someone chose not to believe. From the first gate check, Travis made it clear he wasn't taking any of it seriously. He walked slow, hands in pockets, humming some tune that sounded like a bad memory of country radio. At the side gate, he rattled the chain once, shrugged, and walked off without bothering to secure it. Lock it, I said. Why? No one's coming in. The rule says midnight. Everything closed. He grinned, all teeth. Yeah? And what happens if I don't? Ghost's gonna tell on me? I locked it myself, the padlock heavy in my hand. My pulse throbbed in my ears. That was when I realized his mockery wasn't just arrogance. It was an invitation. The park had heard him, and it doesn't forgive invitations. Around 1:10, the carousel stirred. The faintest threads of music drifted across the midway. The bulbs coughed to life one by one, the painted horses shifting in place. Whoa, Travis laughed. That's actually cool. Old ride's glitching out. He started walking toward it. I grabbed his arm. Hard. Don't. Why not? It's just lights. Bet if I check it out, I'll find some squirrel chewing a wire. Rule number 2, I said, my voice cracking with the weight of everything I'd seen. Do not approach. He pulled free and smirked. You really buy this crap? I didn't follow him. I couldn't. The rules bound me, even in moments like that. All I could do was turn away, fists clenched, ears filling with that hateful, cheerful music. When I looked back, he was standing at the edge of the platform, one hand on the painted flank of a horse. His grin faltered. His body stiffened. And then, like someone had pulled a lever, the horse jolted forward. Its glass eye rolled to me, cracked and gleaming. Travis shouted, but the sound was smothered, pulled down into the music. His legs kicked as the carousel dragged him up, straps I couldn't see locking him into place. His head whipped back once, terror replacing mockery. His mouth opened, but I didn't hear words, just a choking note, swallowed whole by the calliope. The ride spun. Faster. The figures mounted the horses one by one, shadowy shapes with frozen smiles. Travis vanished among them, just another silhouette jerking in rhythm. I forced myself to turn away, to walk, not run, because watching was breaking, and breaking meant joining. By the time the music cut out, I was halfway back to the office. But the carousel wasn't the end. At 1:45, patrolling near the funhouse, I saw movement in the cracked mirrors. My reflection stood inside, but not alone. Travis was there too. His reflection grinned, pounding on the glass. His palms red with something that smeared, but didn't drip. The real Midway lay empty. The funhouse was boarded shut. Inside the mirror world, Travis screamed and screamed, but his mouth only moved in silence. By 2:10, I heard crying. High, broken sobs. The same child's voice as before. But this time, there was another sound braided into it. Travis's voice, desperate and raw. Help me. Please, man, please. I pressed the rules sheet flat against my chest, eyes on the cracked pavement. I knew better. The sobbing twisted into laughter. Both voices, child and Travis, overlapping, mocking. The climax came near 3. Every light in the park blazed to life at once. The Midway, dead for decades, burst awake. Rides groaned as power surged through lines that hadn't worked in years. The Ferris wheel spun once, a full rotation, cabins rattling like bones. The roller coaster cars slammed forward an inch, steel shrieking. And from somewhere deep in the dark, the carousel music rose again, faster this time, furious, as though the horses were stampeding. I stumbled back, blinded by light, deafened by sound. On the ground at my feet lay Travis's cap, cracked down the middle, damp with something I didn't want to name. I left it there. Back at the office, I collapsed in the chair, drenched in sweat, rules sheet limp in my hand. Through the window, in the reflection of the glass, Travis's face appeared beside mine, grinning, bloody, pounding from the inside. I turned away. The carousel music rose again, shrill and endless. The park wasn't resting anymore. The park was awake, and it was hungry. The night after Travis disappeared, the park felt different. Not just heavy, not just watchful, alive. The rules had always kept the place contained threads woven across teeth to hold the bite back. But Travis had laughed at them, torn holes in the net. And now, every step I took, I felt the looseness, like stitches pulling apart in a wound. It began small. The clowns. They were awake, but wrong. Their arms jerked up, froze mid-wave, and stayed. 4 stiff arms pointed toward the sky, hands trembling, motors whining until the sound grew sharp enough to hurt. Keep them powered, I muttered, rushing to the breaker box. The switches were already up. I toggled them off, back on. Sparks snapped. The clowns twitched, but instead of resuming their lazy loop, they just stared forward. One blinked, lids dragging slow like heavy curtains. Another's painted mouth trembled open, teeth grinding faintly. "Don't let us sleep," one whispered again. But the voice wasn't just tired, it was afraid. The Ferris wheel came next. I looked up as I always did, expecting the empty silhouette, the slow rock of the top car. But the booth was vacant, no shadow, no watcher, just emptiness. I waved anyway, hand shaking. Nothing moved. For the first time, the ride didn't wave back, and a chill ran through me as I understood. The operator had left his post. The bargain was breaking. At 1:15, the carousel began to turn without music. The horses moved in silence, glass eyes rolling, hooves pawing at the night air like they were chewing the dark itself. I turned away before they could catch me, before silence tricked me into thinking it was safe. But the midway was shifting. The cotton candy stand seemed farther than it should be. The funhouse looked closer. The coaster rails twisted into shapes my memory swore weren't on the blueprints. The park wasn't static anymore. It was moving me. At 2, the crying began again. Not one voice, many, children wailing in harmony, their sobs echoing down every path. They cried from the Ferris wheel cabins, from the funhouse mouth, from beneath the coaster tracks. And woven into them all, Travis. His screams were wet now, broken, stitched to the children's like another note in their choir. I pressed my hands to my ears, stumbling back, but no rule covered this. No paper shielded me from a chorus that filled every corner of the park. The crying grew louder, angrier, and then they all said it at once. Follow. I turned and ran. By 2:45, the laughter on the tracks had joined them. Dozens, then hundreds of voices overlapping, sprinting through the rails like thunder that never ended. The coaster shuddered, bolts rattling loose. One support beam groaned, and I swore I saw it bow outward like ribs cracking. I ducked behind the ticket booth, hands pressed over my skull, but even there, I felt them, those pale blurs, rushing loops, moving too fast to see, too present not to feel. When silence finally fell, it wasn't relief. It was waiting. I stumbled back to the office, slammed the door shut, locked it twice. My breath came ragged. Delaney was inside, pale, hollow-eyed. He looked at me and shook his head slowly. "They're all breaking," he said. His voice cracked, like it had been worn thin. The clowns, the wheel, the herd, the tracks, all at once. He slid something across the desk. Not a rule sheet, just one sentence, written in a hand that shook so hard the letters stuttered. "If they all break at once, leave, and never come back." My throat closed. But the gates, sometimes they open, sometimes not. His eyes burned into mine. "If you get the chance, don't hesitate. Run." At 3:15, I tried. I grabbed my keys, sprinted to the main gate. The padlock I'd closed myself was gone. The chain hung loose, open, waiting. I shoved at the gate. It didn't move. The metal was soft beneath my hands, warping like rubber. When I pulled back, the bars bent with me, then snapped back into place. The chain coiled around the latch on its own, locking itself shut. I turned and saw the midway stretching longer than it had before. The rides shuffled, sliding against the horizon. The funhouse loomed closer no matter which path I took. The roller coaster tracks bent into impossible curves, vanishing into the trees, looping back to spit me out in front of the carousel again. I was running, but the park had become a maze, a loop. The child appeared near the cotton candy stand. Only this time, she wasn't pretending. Her eyes weren't hollow anymore. They were mirrors, dark glass reflecting my own terrified face back at me. She smiled. "Come on," she said. "It's your turn." I staggered back, clutching the rule sheet to my chest like scripture. No, I didn't follow. I never followed. Her smile widened. "You did when you looked, when you listened, when you believed." Around us, the mirrors of the funhouse began to crack. Thin lines spidered across the glass until chunks splintered free, falling not onto the ground but outward, spilling pale, grinning doubles into the midway. My reflection was among them. He stepped forward, smiling wide, his eyes gleaming too bright. He raised his hand in a wave. I didn't wave back. The clowns froze mid-motion. Their painted faces melted into something like grief. One whispered, not to me, but to the park itself. Too late. The Ferris wheel spun, faster than it ever had when alive, cabins rattling until they tore loose and fell. Yet when they struck the ground, they vanished like soap bubbles. The operator's booth gaped empty, abandoned. The carousel galloped in silence, horses leaping higher and higher until their poles bent like reeds, their glass eyes turned outward, scanning the lot like hunters. The laughter on the tracks never stopped. It built and built until the rails screamed, bolts firing off into the dark like bullets. The park wasn't a park anymore. It was awake. I ran back to the office, slammed the door, locked it, shoved the filing cabinet against it. My hands shook as I pulled the logbook open, scribbling fast. pressing hard enough to tear pages. "If you're hearing this," I whispered aloud, voice trembling, "don't take the night shift at Hollow Pines. Don't even drive past." The rules, they worked until they didn't. They held the teeth back until someone laughed. Outside, the music began. Not from the carousel alone, from everywhere. Calliope shrieks, distorted and wrong, playing across the entire midway. The child pounded on the door. The clown's glass eyes pressed against the office window. My reflection stared back at me from the filing cabinet handle, smiling. I kept writing. Faster, louder. At the end, they don't want your work. They want your witness. They want you to tell it. That's how they spread. That's how they leave this place. The walls shook. The Ferris wheel toppled in silence, crashing into nothing. The coaster's supports buckled. The midway folded into itself. Rides overlapping like cards shuffled wrong. The last thing I heard was the laughter, echoing through every pipe, every bolt, every bone in my body. And the music, sweet and high, playing from everywhere at once.